Well, hello investors and traders. I'm LA Little and this is your weekly NeoTA wrap, where we take a look at these markets and we do it from a neoclassical perspective, asking ourselves what happened last week and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do this show every week, every Sunday evening broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube under the channel LA Little. If you haven't subscribed and you want, just reach up in the right hand corner and do so. You also can subscribe on the site. You can register for free. I've got myself logged in here, but if I log out and bring it up, you can log in, create a login for yourself, create an account, join our newsletter, become part of the TA Today phenomena. As far as what happened last week, it was another week. We'll look at the details here first. Another week of wild volatility. We ended up on the week, had a big spike up at the end of the week, 5.88% on the Nikkei. You had the Hang Seng up, so you had a huge rally overseas. You had a decent rally in Europe, and then here domestically, almost 3% on the NDX, the Russell 2.5%, and so forth. So big week back to the upside after a big 3 days down to start the week. And if you look at the actual numbers here on a weekly basis, you can see we ended up on the week, but still down quite a bit on the month. Moving over to the charts, S&P 500 on a monthly basis. Last week we actually tested those swing point lows from October 2014. So we come all the way back. Remember, that's where all the volume was. Just look at the volumes comparatively and look at October last year. Well, actually a year and a half now, October 14. Big volume spike, that sort of a spike, just like we saw back in August of 2011. That big spike leaves volume, and when you got volume hanging out there, when you get close to it, you eventually going to try to test it again, and that's what we did. Now, the good news for longer term players and even short term traders is that this volume this month is going to be lighter than you had back in October, which suggests this thing will probably try and bounce. That's the good news. The bad news, well, it's probably going to leave volume elsewhere, like on a weekly basis. Here's the volume this last week, and that was a 4-day week, mind you, the volume prior to it. So you're going to see these markets come back down and try to test these levels again at some point, but before that point, you're actually getting the bounce. Here's the volume on the daily chart, also high volume at the bottoms. So you come down, right? You spike down. Now you're spiking back up. Question is how far can it go before it retraces, and how far will it retrace? That's the question, right? And that's the question you have to answer as a trader. Now, in the past, I've pretty much given that data away every time I've spoke. You know, I'm not going to give it all away anymore. It's not fair to the members. If you want to be a member and get the details of how far things I expect them to actually pull back, where those buy points are, then simply come over here, click the Get Started button. You can read all about the details of how and what we provide in terms of the model, the neoclassical model, and at a very reasonable price, you can become a member and get all the benefits of membership, as well as that detail I was just speaking about, which is where should you be buying this market on the next retrace, or should you be buying it at all, right? Are we simply going to get a bounce that ends up being just the ABCD point? In other words, if we look at this, are we going to get a bounce that simply drives this thing lower, or is it going to retrace somewhere down in here and you're going to want to buy it? That's the sort of stuff you need to know. That's the sort of stuff I offer to members, and I offer it at a reasonable price on a daily basis. I call the markets every day, and I call them with a reasonable degree of accuracy, much more so than most people. And that's because on neoclassical, we are letting the market tell us at critical points, are there more buyers? Are there more sellers? Are they willing to sell at lower prices? Are they willing to buy at higher prices? That's what gives you information. That's what allows you to make decisions about what the market is telling you. So bounce underway. We're going to get a pullback. Question is it a pullback or is it going to be another spurt to the downside? And that's the sort of question you're going to have to answer. If I look at the NASDAQ last week, we actually did the same thing. Volume expands. You get the nice big bounce. Heading back up. You know, if you want to talk about how far can this carry, you can do it on the S&P. You can do it elsewhere. The next big test is the retest regions. That would be the first test on the bounce. So if you were to make it all the way back up here, that's almost a guaranteed sell. So assuming this just goes straight back up, that's a sell. I doubt it's going to get that far. You've got some other bars to contend with. In neoclassical, we look at something called wide price spread and high volume. This is a wide price spread, and it doesn't have the high volume, but it's wide price spread. That bar becomes significant. So on the way back up, as it is now, the top of that bar, the bottom of that bar becomes significant. So if I were trying to make an educated guess about how far this could go, I would think this bar is critical. And that's going to give you a decision point. And that's the sort of stuff you teach you here at TA today. Russell's been the weakest one. If we look at the Russell, bounce underway there as well. Bounce underway here, volume left at the bottom on the weekly. And if you go back to the monthly, it hasn't got back above October. This is critical this month. This is the last week of the month. If the Russell can't recapture this, then the market is definitely telling you it has some problems. Does that mean it's going to crash? Not necessarily. Does it mean it's going to go down? Not necessarily immediately. Again, there's other factors, and you have to read those factors together. But that is a critical spot, and that is something I'll be watching along with some sectors that are having the same sort of issues. If you look at the neoclassical model and you come over to the site, resources, current trends, market trends, pull that up and take a look at it, right? I've shown this many times. I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with it. There's two things that are going on. One is stocks lead sectors. Sectors lead the general market. And so as stocks move higher or lower, they tend to move the sectors higher or lower, and they tend to move the general market. The other thing that's going on is the short-term trend tends to lead the intermediate-term trend, which tends to lead the long-term trend. And so if we are seeing bearishness here, bearishness there, and it goes on long enough, you're going to see it over here. And so the key thing, just like we were just talking about on the Russell, is this going to turn? Is it going to transition on that long-term time frame? That doesn't happen very often. If it does happen, it is significant, and it is something you have to pay attention to. And so to give you a flavor of what's going on, I'm just going to pull up a few of the world charts. Trend transition, all ordinaries, right? That one's already transitioned on the long-term time frame. We're on the monthly. If I go to India's chart and I look at India, so far you haven't got the trend transition, but it's trying to do it, and it's trying to do it right now. Here's the swing point low. It's underneath it. If it doesn't get back over it, it's going to transition trend. If I look at Brazil, they've already blown out all their trend on the way down. Bearish here, bearish there, breaks multiple swing points on the monthly. This thing is toast, and if you're in that market, you know it's toast. It's down 40% already. Back up to my friends up north in Toronto. Breaks, trend transition breaks here on the monthly, and then confirms bearishness, right? And now it's just simply going to go after the lower lows. Already tested down there, can certainly come back down there and test it again. And if you just keep going through the charts, if we go over to Asia, to Hong Kong, here's the Hong Kong, already bearish. It's already broken. Now it's a question of how far does it go. Just like in Brazil where you have a 40% decline, here you're not nearly 40% yet, but you're starting to climb up there in terms of numbers. You're as high as 28.2. Now you're down here at 19. Big losses already, and you've got more swing point lows you're going after on the way down, one after another. That's Hong Kong. Shanghai, it looks almost the same. Finally, if we go over to the Nikkei, which is one of the last majors, also hasn't broken on the longer term time frame. That's farther down. So you've got Europe, you got the US, and you got the Nikkei. They're still holding up. They are testing those long-term time frames. If you look at almost anywhere else in the world, you've already broken them. So what does that tell you as a trader? It tells you this bull is long in the tooth. Only some of the major markets where QE has been performed are still holding up, and most everything else is feeling the pressure. Question is how long will it hold up? And as I say, in neoclassical, we look to the charts, we look to the trends, we measure as things take place and make a decision. And that decision right now is you can expect a bounce. If you look at the charts and you know what you're looking for, and that's the sort of thing I try to teach, and we teach here at TA Today, you're going to look for areas where you have higher volume, wide price spread bars. Those become significant. So if I'm looking at this particular chart, this area right here looks significant. And so as price moves into that area, we get a test. And when we get that test, we can make a decision about what the market is telling us or isn't. That's the sort of thing you do from a neoclassical perspective. That's the sort of thing you look for to tell you what the market is telling you so that you are better informed about what you should or shouldn't be doing. You can do that here on the daily chart, right? Or you can do it on longer term charts or even shorter term charts if you want, like day trades. Now move over to the longer term chart, the weekly chart. You have the same sort of questions that can be answered. For example, this high volume low, that would probably be a critical place on the way back, and you can see the support zones here in the TA Today charts showing you this area is going to be support, just as you can see that these areas in red are going to be resistance on the way back up, and those where you have overlap, like in this particular case right here, right, even more critical resistance. There's other concepts though that these charts don't always find automatically. For example, overlap between wide price spread high volume bars become critical, and so you can use that knowledge and the test into it. It's always the test. That's where the market releases information. That's where you always need to be looking and using that information to make more informed decisions about your portfolio and your trades. So if we look to the calendar for next week, you've got the Fed meeting and a Fed announcement on Wednesday. You've actually got the Bank of Japan on Thursday. It's all about the central bankers now. I mean, we've had this correlation between oil and the market. I suspect that's going to wear off some, and it's going to be more about the central bankers again. And so those are the two big economic numbers that are scheduled this week. I suspect they are going to move the markets those 2 days, and that is where we need to be looking those days. Where is price? What is it testing? How does it react? That will give us more information on a short-term basis. As far as the weekly basis, the market's undergoing a bounce. How far is it going to bounce? We're going to have to measure it, make decisions. And as a member of TA Today, again, just come over, hit the Get Started button. I'll keep you informed on a daily basis where those buy points are and where the sell points are. Have a great one. Thanks for joining me. Take care. I'll see you next time. Good night.